Tara, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. So before I ask how you've been, why don't you just tell us just a little about who you are, um, kind of what your, I guess, for lack of better terms, your bio, what you want people to know about you.
For sure. So I am a 31 two-time rape survivor. I experienced rape both when I was a child and a teenager. But I actually had no awareness of this happening up until 2020, end of last year. So in 2020, I discovered that I was raped in high school. And then my 30th birthday, I found out that I experienced child sexual abuse and was raped at 4. So so crazy that this happened. But basically, after the rape happened when I was 17, I started experiencing a really severe, debilitating depression, and this depression like stripped my whole personality, and also made me feel so physically numb and heavy. So up until maybe like 6 years ago, I was basically catatonic on my couch, not able to like talk or move because the depression was so physically debilitating. And I did everything humanly possible to try to get it under control, including going on 50 different medications over a decade of time, just a trial error process of trying them not working, and then trying another and another. And it was brutal and excruciating. And up until 2020, I was, very, very committed to getting better. But then, like, after so many medications failed me, I was like, I became completely hopeless. And so I became very suicidal. And I decided to go to a residential treatment center in order to get help. And when I was there, a miracle happened. A psychiatrist figured out how to lift my depression within just 5 days. So I went from literally having absolutely no life to just staring down at the carpet on my floor to being able to like live again and feel again and experience life. But unfortunately, this only lasted 2 weeks because 2 weeks later, I started having what is known as tonic immobility, which is an immobile paralysis collapse state that the body goes into. The brain tells the body to go into as an effort to survive. It's an innate primal reaction in us. And so I started experiencing paralysis, and my body would collapse for anywhere between 5 minutes up to an hour. So once again, I was barely able to kind of live my life, but through tremendous trauma work, a remarkable therapist, and just like the dedication of healing, I worked through with exposure therapy and worked through kind of that processing of that trauma. And I was able to get my paralysis episodes down from every single day, multiple times a day, to just a few times a month. So there was a lot of living I could do in between that. And so I went on to kind of be somewhat a little bit of a sexual assault survivor advocate, and also a certified recovery support specialist who helps people who have dealt with mental health issues, such as myself. Um, and I was doing really well, and things were going very wonderfully. Kind of felt like I was given my life back again. And then, of course, my 30th birthday, I then started having trauma memories surfacing, and I discovered what happened to me as a child. So as I was kind of not saying fully healing from what happened to me as in high school, because I don't think they were ever kind of fully healed. But when I was working through all of that and felt like I've gotten to a place where both my body and brain was finding some ease with it,
Yeah.
I then was hit with like the reality of like, oh, this is why things are so severe, and I've had such
Yeah.
strong responses and everything because of what happened as a child. And all that resurfacing then kind of made my body go into haywire again. I I was in the hospital actually last year in November because I started having fibromyalgia, and the pain was excruciating, but I also experienced a significant like weakness where I literally could not
Yeah.
stand or move. And that all happened with the realization of what happened as a child. So it kind of just all very much stems from it. Kind of everything that I've ever gone through, all my symptoms have stemmed through this unresolved trauma that I had no awareness of. So I took time for myself. I was in school, but I decided to step away and I was gonna start working, but I was like, no, I need to, work on this and be better for not only myself, but for my clients. And so I started working on also the childhood trauma and also taking care of and resting and doing a lot, honoring what my body needs
Yeah.
and trusting that it has the ability to heal itself. And through that tremendous amount of work, I can say that I'm finally back in school, thinking about will be working shortly. And yet I am still also every week working on that childhood trauma and working on exposure therapy. So definitely not out of the woods, but I've leaned into my own resilience and my own capacity for healing and my body's for healing. So,
You
yeah.
say all this, like, and I don't wanna make light of it, you say all it so easily, all the things that are like, I mean, for what I experienced and imagined and heard over time, with all these, stories like this that is hard for people to say that I've got to work through this, or this is what's happened, and okay, what do I do with this? Honoring the fact that your body needs rest, honoring what your body's, all these phrases that we just hear, and it's like, yeah, that sounds cool. Is there a pill for that? Yeah, I like that phrase. Can I hang that on my wall? All these things that you're saying, and I know that they're not coming easily, which is why the first thing that comes to mind is, as you realize this, as you at least find that moment that was like, okay, something doesn't make sense here. And I think that takes a different power inside somebody, that it's like something doesn't isn't right. And it's not just a simple, I stepped on that rock funny. That's why my ankle hurts. It's like there's something more to this story, and maybe it's deeper inside me. You found that moment and took a small step, but a major step as to work through that. Did you feel something kind of like break open in a way that allowed this kind of conversation to come out, that you could say, okay, there's this, and I need to work through this, knowing that work through it doesn't mean a day, doesn't mean 2 weeks, could mean 2 years, could mean 200 years, right? Did something like just, I don't want to say snap, but like fall apart and break open to say, look, you've been holding this inside here. We kept it back here from you. Now I'm gonna like it. Now I'm gonna open it wide for you, so that you now can work with me, to figure this out. You're ready for it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's a crazy thing because I will say that when when I found out about especially like my 30th birthday and the child's realm, I definitely had that notion of like, oh my God, are you kidding me? Literally, there's more. Like I
Yeah.
feel like my trauma is an infomercial, but wait, there's more, kind of thing. But and so I was definitely left with that, and I was left with the frustration and just I mean, sure, also like the exhaustion of just like I don't want to do this anymore. But I think this time it was very much compiled with, okay, but this does make sense. I do really feel that this is explained. This has put an explanation to everything that kind of seemed like this fictitious, like almost like kind of ghost in my like memory and in my body, right? Like this is a tangible reason and like that I can put, all my energy into, and basically it just the fact that it made sense, it was actually extremely relieving
Yeah.
in a weird conflicting way. Like it
Yeah.
is very much a dichotomy of like this is so painful and it makes sense. And also, I'm a person who always seeks answers, right? So the fact that it was kind of this unexplainable, like I said, fictitious kind of boogeyman almost, like, um, that didn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
And I kind of walked away almost believing like I might never know fully,
Yeah.
and keep on thinking that I do. Um, but it so yeah, it did actually hit me with like, yes, this is so frustrating. I'm exhausted. I don't want to do this. This is actually the most painful torment and
Yeah.
thing I have to process, but also it is incredibly relieving to finally have that
Yeah.
explanation. and to realize that all the crazy symptoms and stuff that I've been dealing with for, ever since like I was a child, like, all my anxiety, all my panic, all my like depression, all
Yeah.
the really strange symptoms that almost like didn't have an explanation. And people were like, yeah, that could be from trauma. Like it just, every
Yeah.
single thing that I can now look back on, I know stems from what happened. And every single body response and symptom, I can connect it to like, oh,
Something. Yeah.
that's why, that's why,
Yeah.
that's why. And that is relieving and somewhat also very unsettling,
Sure.
right? That
Yeah.
I have that answer, but it also is extremely relieving. So, and I think it also came with this like kind of finalization of like, okay, I have done so much work. This is kind of the not the finish line, but this really
Yeah.
does feel like we've been digging so much under the surface. And yet realizing now that it's just been kind of surface level, but this is finally the root of everything. So now I can work on that. And now I can truly feel like once that's in a place that's manageable and worked through enough, then nothing can stop me going forward. And I'm an incredibly stubborn person.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I'm always a person who wants to seek the answer. And I'm like, okay, I'm dealing with this. Okay, how can I go about this? Um, so it doesn't hold me back.
Yeah.
That's the thing, I don't let things hold me back, and so, yeah, so it was very much just like, yeah, this is incredibly challenging, I don't wanna do this in one any way, shape, or form, but, okay, I really do believe this is finally it. Tackling this will then finally be what I can move to go from surviving to truly thriving,
Yeah. And with
and
something
I've seen.
yeah. Sorry, I was gonna say that, I mean, it was something so large and, kind of embedded in a way, right? I mean,
Mhm.
your mind did what it needed to do and what it was supposed to do, what it's, trained to do. Looking at, like, physical examples of stuff, right? It's easy to make sense of it when you didn't have necessarily even just a memory, and you can't really call that a physical process of it, right? But it's at least something that you can see. This was something that, like, couldn't see altogether. What is making sense of it even look like then? I mean, and you said it, and I mean, as you're saying it, I'm like, I know what, when my body, like, aches for various reasons, and I can tell the difference between now, what attention pain feels like and what, I just picked on my kid the wrong way pain, right? It's the difference between the two, but like making sense of the other one, the tension one is like, hold on, like my day was fine. Like I don't feel any bit of strain, any bit of stress. Like where are you coming from? That to me just adds to it. But this is something way bigger. How do you make sense? And please don't feel like you have to divulge everything or, make this huge, to-do list for people that are listening to it, but what does making sense of something like this look like?
Yeah, so for me, what makes sense, and I think that I've found like so extraordinarily important is kind of knowing like the neuroscience, especially with what happens in tonic mobility and with trauma and our brain and body connection. So me learning that has been so like exponentially important. And so basically what I found is that when tonic mobility happens, so the paralysis that I experience, basically when trauma occurs, our and anxiety and distress, our thinking part of our brain, so our neocortex shuts down. So literally when people, when people are experiencing like a panic attack, like don't ask them, a mathematical question, right? They won't be able to like think. And people, you can ask them like, what were you thinking at the moment? And they will literally
Yeah,
say, I wasn't thinking,
yeah,
right? So yeah, so that happens in anxiety and distress, but also when tonic mobility occurs, the mammalian part of the brain, which is the emotion and memory part of the brain, also can shut down. So when those two are shut down, the only part of the brain that's technically left in this state is the reptilian brain, which controls like our autonomic nervous system, and it controls basically all things that our brain does automatically without thinking. So like swallowing, temperature regulation, and things like that. So I was in that state, and basically all I could do, right? And when people are in tonic mobility, it's a literal full body paralysis. So people can think like, oh, you thought you couldn't move. Like, no, no, physically, it's literally the play dead response in possum. So collapse entirely and basically go into, I guess you could call it an extreme like dissociative state, unable to talk or move. But that is what happens with trauma and for people. So when I look back on it, I'm like, okay, well, it makes sense that I couldn't remember it up until just recently because that little emotion memory part of the brain was inaccessible. Like, of course I couldn't remember. And also, it was so, traumatic and overwhelming to, my nervous system and my body. My brain felt like that because it goes into tonic mobility and all the states of survival as an active protection, right? So and how does a child make sense
Kind of
of
a
that?
chat, right? Yeah.
You can't,
Yeah.
let alone a teenager. Hell, I'm an adult and I still struggled to even kind of comprehend, trauma and what happened to me and so many others. But so you can look at it like that. So for me, I'm like, okay, well, that makes sense. It was literally that part of my brain was turned off. So of course I can't remember it. But then I also took it a step further and learned about explicit and implicit memory. So our brain has two types of memory basically. There's explicit, which is like conscious awareness memory. So like something we actively, like try to remember. But then there's implicit memory. And implicit memory is like body memory. So that's like where the saying the body
Body
keeps
keeps
the score
score,
comes
sure.
in. Yeah, and so there was the body memory the whole entire time. Ever since I was 4, whether like my debilitating depression was kind of another step for my brain to kind of numb it
Right.
completely. So my body was like screaming like this is what happened and my brain wanted none of
Right,
that because
right,
it was
yeah.
like no 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 this is too much. We can't process that. We went into this state for a reason. We're not gonna, we're not gonna say anything. So it kind of had to mask it
Yeah.
so when my depression finally lifted, then of course my body like went into haywire and then also started collapsing because it fully
Now
remembered.
remember, yeah.
Exactly. So it's tapping and then that's also where the flashes of memory came into it. It's tapping into both that explicit and implicit memory. And so my brain was holding it. I just wasn't consciously aware of what that was there. But somatically, I was, body response, I was too. And so now I can look back on it and like I said earlier and see all my symptoms. And I was like, my body has actually been trying to tell me this story for a
All the
long
time,
time.
yeah.
Like I've known my truth. It's just that my brain has felt like it has not felt safe enough
To
to
be able
process
to,
it.
yeah.
And now I've worked through so much therapy and trauma work and whatever. Like I now know that whatever comes up, I can handle it. And so it's kind of like me trying to get my brain to understand that it's okay now.
Yeah.
It's been
Yeah.
years and whatever comes up, we can handle it. And so that's why I also very much lean into what my body is telling me because it's like my body has known this truth. And that's what makes sense. Like I've known all these random things, whether I knew what they were from
Sure.
or not up until recently. It just looking back, it just all makes sense.
Yeah.
And like I said, it's my body's been trying to tell this story for a long time. And my brain is kind of like, okay, I guess we can't
Yeah.
let's try to, right? And so that's kind of how I make sense of it. Knowing that neuroscience has helped
Yeah.
me so much. And also the biggest thing is knowing that all those responses, tonic mobility especially, is
Yeah.
involuntary, meaning that I don't, a person does not consciously choose to go into that state. The brain literally does it as an innate, primal, instinctual response, uh, you know, that's in our nervous system. So that helps me make sense. Whenever things kind of don't make sense, I lean back into what is my body saying.
Yeah.
And I think that sometimes things can't make sense. And the fact that making sense of the senseless also just kind of drives people, it drives me especially crazy.
Yeah.
So I think that it's like the fact that some things don't make sense and I kind of will never be able to like morally understand it, that makes sense to me. if that makes
It
sense.
does, and I mean, I mean, as someone who kind of like it as well, like likes to listen to that stuff, and is learning how to do that on a whole nother level as I get older here. That that narrative that you've given yourself, like all the again, go back to those like fun sayings that everybody hears, like this, that's the truth. There's the reason why all those sayings make sense, is because if you wake up every day and tell yourself that you suck, eventually, like that's the narrative that your body is hearing as well as your mind, and the two of them, whether they don't, seem like they're connecting, they always are connecting. They're just maybe doing two different ways of figuring out how to walk you through this. And maybe that works for you. Maybe it's not exactly how you want it to work for you. But no, it truly does.
Find that sorry, but it's trying to find that body and brain harmony
Yeah.
because they definitely are both trying so much to protect you. They're kind of at odds. And so it's kind of bringing them together. It's like, no, we together can,
Can figure it out.
process this and
Yeah.
heal and all that.
So,
Yeah.
and
Mhm.
with that thought in mind, then, how do you look at something like this and I don't want to say believe it or not believe it, but how do you kind of wrestle with the fact that like what you cannot necessarily fully put together and piece together at one time and know happened? How do you put that together in a world that's like, you do remember this, like, I remember that so and so did this to me when I was 4, and your body literally said, nope, like we're not going to show you this in full right here. What's changed from then to now to be able to see that. And I mean, I'm going to use that word, I guess, is the best I got right now, to believe that you're not just being sold something, because I could hear somebody in the background listening to this going, yeah, no, how does that even, she's lying. I could hear that person, like saying, no, you're making this up. Like your body did this or your brain doing this. This isn't what happened. What changed from then to now for you to be able to piece that together? Maybe that takes the person that's going, yeah, Tara isn't believable, and say, yeah, this is exactly how this works. Because you said it so beautifully, like in science as well as in like normal terms. And I love that. So maybe slightly see if we can like help that person out.
Yeah. Hmm, that's such a good question. Because we do completely live in a world where
Yeah.
like people do, come forward and say this happened to me and they're like absolutely
Absolutely
not.
not,
Like how
right? I
do
mean,
you not
I could see you
remember
posting just
XYZ?
a 3 sentence version of this, and like, and someone, maybe 100 comments will be like, there for you, but there's that one person, bot or
Yeah.
not, that walked in there was like, that didn't happen. Like, why didn't you remember it until now? What took? I could see that, and like that right there is the whole reason, that's telling your story, because there is a reason. Take the neuroscience version of it, or the wishy-washy, like, mental side of it. Whatever you want, there is a reason why.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I see it literally like daily of people like coming
I'm
forward and then
sure.
like, in the comments being like, "Well, how could they not remember, this exact like memory?" They're like, "It was 10 years ago. Like, how do they not remember?" It's like, "Well, do you remember the shirt you were wearing 10 years
Right.
ago or where you bought it from?" Like that's a little bit of like my anger showing through.
Are
But
you
like
okay?
but that's why for me, I'm also like people aren't explained though the neuroscience of it,
Sure.
and of course people are still going to deny it, but that's why also me sharing that and then my story, the actual like lived
Yeah.
experience connected to it. You can't make up that I go into paralysis. I mean, you can say that I'm faking, right? But also like who the hell would even do that?
Right.
But but so yeah, that's also why I'm like such an advocate, and that is why like
Yeah.
I always choose every platform to tell my story because it's not only the story in itself, but also I'm like, no, but here there's literally the
There's
neuroscience and I
this.
can
Yeah.
explain it all, right? I worked very hard on kind of getting it all to hopefully like kind of dumb it down for, like, people to,
Yeah.
to share because it's
We
just
need that.
information we're just not
Yeah.
talked about. Like, we're just not taught, and it's never talked about. So I can try to combat it with that, but it still definitely
Yeah.
drives me insane, and, that's why I'm kinda like, "Okay, Tara, well, if at, like, the end of the day, even if no one believes you, I know for a fact what happened,
Yeah.
And I know that because I can always lean into the somatic response to it.
Yeah.
The tension, the tightening in my
Sure,
stomach,
sure.
the feeling like I'm not able to move like my muscles because they're so stiff and almost like literally frozen, right? The reaction to something as simple as gum that connects to my childhood. Like I can, have full
Yeah.
body like shaking and trembling. Like it's all
There.
there.
Yeah.
Whether you want to say I'm faking it or not, I know
You
my
know.
truth, and I
Yeah.
think that that's where my power comes from.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, everyone cannot believe me, and I know what happened
Yeah.
still. But, yeah, so I can take those comments and, I can explain the science, and I can, I can share my story and try to really, plead that, yes, this is true. This is what happened. This is what happened for so many. It's not even rare.
Yeah.
Like it's,
No.
my response, the tonic of mobility, like over 70% of sexual assault survivors have reported some form of
Some
tonic
form of it. Yeah.
mobility. Yeah, meaning leaning involuntarily, their brain chose to make their body unable to move. And it wasn't that they consciously did that,
Yeah.
right? So we all have these thoughts of like, well, why didn't you run? Why didn't you
Yeah.
fight? Why did you just freeze? And I had it myself. I was haunted with those thoughts of like, how could my body just,
Yeah.
I kinda use the words, like, "How did I just let it happen?" "How could I just," like whatever terminology I wanted to use, because I think when trauma happens, and one of the most cruelest parts of trauma is that when it happens something happens to us, a heinous action happens to us, right? We're not at fault, but we walk away fully believing we
Yeah.
are at
Yeah.
and it's really fucked up. Like, excuse my language, but
No.
it really is.
Yeah.
And then we have all of society also asking these questions. And like I said, for me, I was completely haunted with like well, was it a battle of like wills? Was I not strong enough? Was I weak? What is it? Like help me make sense. So that's why for me, when I was told what happens actually with tonic mobility and having, knowing of what happens with possums and like
I was,
humans have this
that was where my head was
yeah,
going to. I was like, I'm not going to say that out loud, but like, we believe it
no,
when
it's
other animals like lock up and freeze. Like, why can't we just go,
yes,
you know what? You're an animal. You
exactly,
might do
exactly.
something similar. It may not look exactly like a goat that falls asleep when you scare it, but you do have these same similar responses. We have sorry.
Totally,
I'm not
totally. Like
laughing
I
at the
said,
story or the reference. I'm like, wow, that was like I'm right there in the
yes,
same head that, there would be my response
totally.
to that person leaving the comment like, "Hey, do you laugh at a possum too?" That's my like
Such a good
sarcasm.
response. I'm gonna use that going
It's
forward.
yours. It's yours,
Yeah,
Tara.
yeah, no, you're so right. And yeah, we all have this capability of having this response.
Yeah.
Like it is woven within us. Like I said, it's from our reptilian part of
We
our
just don't wanna
brain, so
believe
the
it, right? Yeah.
reptile part of it, right? So yeah, there's many other animals and insects. So why would a human be any
Any
different?
different, right?
And the fact that we at anyone at any point, if their brain perceives a situation as a life-threatening event, they can experience tonic immobility,
Sure.
like, at any point. So just because it hasn't happened, that doesn't mean that it doesn't.
Yeah.
I'm kind of the rare one that walked away with it as a trauma response. A lot of people have it as, like, a lot of people have it during their trauma, but like
Yeah.
I said, like, I'm a person who kinda made it their go or my brain kinda made it their
Their
go-to stress
go-to, yeah.
response, you know? Yeah, so like you said, we have completely all of like society, and I can be, I can teach the nervous system and all of those things, and I will absolutely do it. And I do think it does make a difference. But I think the biggest thing is I'm not trying to talk to the people that deny it. I'm fully talking to
Of
the
course.
other
Yeah.
survivors, the other people who've experienced trauma,
Yeah.
who have thought like, how did I not run? How did I not
Yeah.
fight? Why did I just freeze? And I'm here to say that it wasn't you. Like it was not you. It was completely involuntary. Your brain literally felt like, I mean, it's also tonic mobility is a state closest to death. Like the
Yeah.
body prepares for death. It literally believes there is no other option but to and maybe hopefully survive.
Yeah.
that is that is how serious that is, and I can share my story, and I know you kinda commented it, like, I say it I kinda share it so matter of factly sometimes, but there is such a brutal, raw, horrific, thing to realize when you think that my body and many others who experience sexual assault or other trauma, because not just that trauma will cause it, literally their brain felt like this is an inescapable,
Yeah.
threat. This is an inescapable experience. Um, and we're gonna do tonic immobility to protect us,
Yeah.
and maybe we can walk away from it, and I fully believe that that is why I'm still here today. It's why I'm telling the
Because it
story,
protected
and
you.
so,
Yeah.
like I said, I'm not talking to, like, the comments, I'm talking to those other survivors that have that shame and guilt that are haunted with those thoughts, and I'm here to say that, like, it wasn't you. It was completely involuntary. It was not a personal choice to just collapse,
So those quiet those
to just
yeah.
yeah,
It's those quiet
yeah,
carriers, right? I mean, that just kinda
yeah,
hold that story and don't either don't know what to do with it, don't feel like
mhm,
it's important, haven't
yeah,
made sense or, whatever the case may be, but, have held it in for that. You talk
yeah.
about, just the body's response to it, and, you have to, go into any more detail because you've done a lot anyway as far as, like, the body's response to it, but just as far as, the signals that we've kind of like become known as like, well, this is a stress response. My shoulders are tensed up, my back starts hurting.
Mhm.
I've done a lot of like, extra work as I've grown older, and I've never, thankfully, like experienced any version of trauma, but my body is starting to react in ways that are unfamiliar. And I'm like, this doesn't make sense. Like I'm fit enough that this, like, I shouldn't have been injured, or this shouldn't have hurt that long. And I've learned a lot more about like the other parts that speak, and we have other areas that like do tense up and do give us that signal, but they're not as necessarily, as a parent, we might call it like, tendonitis and things like that, but it's like that's a body's like tension. But the one that keeps it coming up is the psoas. You know where that is?
No, I don't think
So the
so.
psoas is right there. It's basically what drives your knee like up towards your face. It as you're seated, it's tightening. It's right there on the inside of the hip, but it locks into the back, towards your back as well, and tightens up. But the nickname for it is called the seat of the soul, and it's
Okay.
directly like linked to how you're breathing, really. So if you're breathing shallow, it's getting tight, and so it's been interesting to hear it, and that's what caused me to start walking down this path. I'm like, this is weird. Like, what's going on
Yeah,
here?
yeah. There's something more
Yeah,
here.
and
Yeah,
I mean, so it's interesting to hear, like, on an extreme level, what your body did, because to me, like, on a s and I'm gonna, it's extremely small level, of the similar thing of that, hey, like, your body's telling you something, and it's maybe speaking in a way that you've never spoken before. Um, and what caught me was that, I, again, like, never had any weird injury, but if it bothers me for too long, then I'm gonna, like, speak up. And no doctor. I mean, it was a very like simple, like, I was there for my physical. I was like, hey, this is what's bothering me. And it was like, well, just stretch this. Here's a muscle relaxer. And it didn't do anything. I'm like, okay, well, this is weird.
yeah.
What
Mhm.
else is going here? And that's it. And I can feel it. I can't get rid of my kids. I don't want to get rid of my kids. But when there's
Yeah,
tension there, I can feel it there. I can feel, when there's tension in the house for whatever reason, just because, your sandwich was cut the wrong way or a huge,
yeah,
meltdown, that's where it's reacting now. And I've never had that experience. So it's, to me, all this is believable for that reason on a small scale, and I
yeah,
hope that people hear that too, because you're so, to your own admission there, so candid. And that's rare. As we were talking before the show, it's not something that people actually do. I think we're still stuck on the, here's the awareness of what's going on, whatever the case may be. And you've
yes,
done what everybody else should be doing, and that is move to the next step of the work, of
yeah,
what's going on here. So, as we tie things in a not a neat bow, but at least a bow here, all together, what is coming back here to yourself look like now? And how does, I mean, knowing that, again, just like anything else, it doesn't mean it goes away, but you certainly can live without it being a problem anymore. What does that all look
yeah.
like for you now?
Huh. Um, I think that the experience with my trauma, like it very much felt like it kind of like shattered me. Like there's so many pieces. there's so many fragmented pieces, and that also has been part of my trauma healing, which is like there's been there's been excuse me, there's been like I said, like kind of memory flashes, right, of the actual like visual events, but then there's also been like somatic pieces to it, the body pieces. And then there's been also like beliefs tied to it. And then there's also been like thoughts there, but also there's been so many unanswered questions. Like fully, basically, like I'm not even knowing who it was, what happened, right? Like there's so many holes in my memory, and I could hear someone, like we were saying earlier, someone immediately say, like, well, like if you don't know who it was, or blah blah, if you don't know these specific details, and I can understand that, and for me, I know it's there, but it's been slowly over time, over since 2020, having these random pieces shared with me, whether that's in somatic memory, whether that's in visual memory, whether that's been in flashbacks or whatever. It's all these pieces of these puzzle that I know I can say I know the final image, but it's still like it's definitely still working on those answers, or yeah, working on those answers and discovering them. And so that's kind of like where my trauma healing, is right now. Like I don't have all the answers. I know one truth, I don't have all the answers. I know what happened. But I'm kind of doing with the exposure therapy where I'm taking like pieces of things that I know what happened, and those pieces then are then making my brain then randomly have these more images, and like slowly over time, like I said, it's piecing puzzles together. So, and not only that, but it's also been work of trusting that my body knows, and then my body then um helping then my brain to be like, it's okay, you can share a little bit more, like, and also just the remarkable uh, like I guess I would say is like kind of just inner healing and resilience that we have, just as humans, leaning into that, and kind of like my body and brain has known how to process this. It's just that it's felt like it's been too much, too overwhelming, and things like that. But I through all my work, I've been able to get to a place where no matter like I said, no matter what shows up, no matter what answers I get or are unanswered, and I still have to answer it, which I feel like I'm finally getting almost all those answers, I will say. But I can handle it. And it's getting every part of me to trust, and all those fragmented pieces to come together as whole. And I used to always say that I was broken and shattered from my trauma, and I do still believe that to some degree, but I think that there's a part of me that is a core part of me that has still remained whole. And it's coming back to that. It's coming back to my inner awareness, my inner insight, and capability of surviving what should have killed me, honestly, again and again and again. Uh And yeah, so I mean, it's not, yeah, like you said, it's not something obviously that's going to be tied up in a bow. There's still a lot of things that I'm working on, but I have got to a place in my life that I know that like at one day it's not going to hold me back in ways that I thought it was. And this is very recently, like just in the last like kind of weeks, I have seen such a shift
Yeah.
through so much of the different types of therapy I do and things like that. I've just been able to come back to like, no, I can handle this. And it's my body learning that, and it's
Yeah.
also my brain
Yeah.
learning that, and all of us working together. And I think that that's really what is, in a sense of coming home to me is it's all in me, like, no one else is doing it, you know? I'm definitely getting support, much needed support, and, having those, the support circles and everything is so important, but at the end of the day, like,
That's you.
no one else is doing this work, no one else is choosing to do this work but me, so,
Tara, thank you so
yeah.
much for being such an incredible voice for those quiet carriers, to
Oh,
be able
thank
to
you.
release hopefully their story as well. But more importantly, thank you for sharing a piece of yours with us.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.